What I would like to do is for, say, the next 10, 15 minutes, just run through a number of megatrends that we're seeing that's based on a report done by ULI in cooperation with PwC. Annually, we have a cooperation with PwC where we analyze emerging trends across the globe. We produced 3 reports from that: Asia, Americas, and Europe. And this time we've pulled all of that together and added something extra to that on megatrends. And then some other work that ULI has been doing with our global trustees, where we brought all of our global trustees together last February in Paris for the first time outside the United States, and had a very broad discussion about big trends, what needs to change, and how to do that. And I want to close with a short video showing some of the outputs of the discussion that we had there, which I think gives some nice flavor to, okay, but what's next? Because we already have a lot of discussion on megatrends. Some of you may have joined the panel yesterday where we also discussed the future of real estate. That might sound somewhat familiar to you. I quickly run through a number of megatrends: rapid urbanization, demographics and social change, technological breakthroughs, the shift in economic power and climate change and resource scarcity. However, the main message I already want to give you is this is all related. Actually, you cannot look at one trend without looking at the others. And I think that also creates an additional layer of complexity to what we're all discussing. Because what you will see in a minute is that many of the topics that I will address will each come back at every trend, because it's all so linked. So don't think I'm on purpose repeating myself. It's just because everything is so related. Start with urbanization. We asked, as part of that emerging trends survey that we do annually, how will urbanization factor in your business decision in the coming years? Well, you may not be able to see all the percentages, but I think what's very clear is that the biggest share says it has at least a moderate or even a large impact. Moderate, large. The great urbanization wave will inevitably require major private and public sector investment in infrastructure for cities to be successful. But what are then the opportunities and the challenges when you look at rapid urbanization? Someone called it the race for space. And then in Europe, I think the perspective is even different from if you look at, for example, cities in Africa. Most of the urbanization is going to take place in 3 countries: Nigeria, India, and China. So, as a matter of fact, urbanization in a global perspective in Europe will be limited. But given our set of cities, where most of our cities are already very old, most of them were developed before we had cars, we really need to think how to accommodate those people coming to cities. And not only people, businesses as well. And the thing is, we want to all be together now. And I think it really requires some smart thinking how to do that. So it's the race for space. It's the global middle class who is expected to grow by 75% in the next 5 years. They have more to spend. They have more demands. What do they want? How do we accommodate that? Best bets. Well, it's always nice to do some blue sky thinking without kind of any limitations to it. Large cities, decent infrastructure, as if it's kind of pop-up, tick box, let's do that. But I think these are at the same time the challenges. How to provide that decent infrastructure, combination of public-private. We were having a discussion this morning. It all starts with infrastructure. If you want to do it right, you first have to have the infrastructure. It's very difficult, and I think that's one of the challenges for the European cities. They are there already. And so how do you then implement that within an existing footprint? I think Amsterdam is a good example of that. Livable, placemaking. What are the most important challenges to that? I've called it successful density. How to accommodate those people and those businesses, making it livable, sustainable, resilient, true mixing of uses, affordable housing, preventing ghettos for rich and poorer people to arise. Existing urban planning approaches where you have much more separation of uses. How for the public sector to become more flexible in that? Those are important challenges. What about the rural areas where people are living? We cannot say we look for urbanization and we forget about the rest. Then we'll have a next issue, say, in a couple of decades. Smaller European cities, how to cope with that? Demographics and social change, same picture here. How do you think it factors in your business decisions in the coming years? Again, the majority says it has at least a moderate, even not a large impact. And what do we do with that? What is it? The opportunities, growing consumer power. I just showed you the growth of the middle class. Innovation potential of a diverse workforce. We had a workshop 2 weeks ago in Oslo where we looked at what are the demands of the innovation economy for the real estate sector. They want something else. How does the real estate sector cope with that? Chris gave a very striking contribution last night at dinner to talk about the sharing economy. And the thing that struck me most was that he, when referring to the changing office space demand, said work has left the building. What does that mean? I can think about it for hours still. And urban, I've called it age-related housing. That doesn't only mean for more senior people, for the elderly, it also means for the younger generation. And I think thinking about that in relation to affordable housing in combination with more expensive residential is a very important one. The younger generation might want something else. There are even projects now coming up that where houses don't or apartments don't have a kitchen anymore or a living room. You just share it. And that's, I first needed to get used to the idea. Perhaps there are some others, but I think this is important to think about. Best bets. Aging populations in developed countries, convenience stores, chemists, health-related, of course, well-connected locations. We don't want to travel hours anymore. It's a waste of time. World-leading university cities, to have that livability, to have that kind of innovation environment. Go where the millennials go. What are then the challenges? What is the impact of the sharing economy? We now see a lot of innovation coming from outside the sector. And it's going really fast. The iPhone was introduced 7 years ago. Can you ever imagine leaving home without it? And it's going that fast. And we haven't only discovered, we've just scratched the surface from it. Most future population growth in less developed countries. What does that mean? What does it mean for social unrest, for inequality? We need to think about those elements as well, because if we don't include that, it will not be successful. Technology disruption. Well, this I found an interesting one, actually. But the examples I just gave, and then looking at this response, where people still think it will have only slight impact or a moderate impact. The one above is Europe, and the one below is the US. When Europe, people still think impact will be okay. I can't imagine that will be the case. It's already not the case. It has already a big impact, and it will only become bigger. And what are the opportunities, the bets and the challenges? Well, demands for new office concepts that provide multifunctional workspace, collaboration, communication, sharing. The growth of the middle class. What are the best bets? Thinking about what people want instead of processes. People want to talk to each other. They're social animals. Flexible space. Places. Think about places, place making. What are the challenges? can we as a sector adjust ourselves to innovate more? How do we get ourselves to innovate more? Not only the big innovations are coming from outside, but also from inside. And what's next? What's here tomorrow? The speed of technological changes is really fast. The need to focus on areas of resilient demand, that's an interesting point, because if you would have the answer to what is resilient, you won't need to sit here and listen to the presentation. The potential strength, the political strength, and I think it is really a public sector element, to really also implement it. Years ago, and in the Netherlands, we've already had discussions for years about toll roads, paid driving, etc. It has never been implemented. Years ago, the discussion was, well, technology is not fully developed yet, it's difficult. Technology is not the issue anymore. It is about the strength to do it. Can we really now make the optimal use of it to make our lives better livable? Shift in economic power. By 2030, the purchasing power of the emerging 7 will have overtaken the G7. That's only 15 years from now. That's not so long. Increasing office and retail demand in emerging markets. And what are the best bets? Creation of new sources of capital. So much Asian capital now we see coming into London already. And we're discussing among ourselves, when will it come to the continent? And what will it do? We already see a huge push of capital into the market. What will it mean? Will it again mean new paradigms as we thought years ago? What is the cost of capital and what is the required return? Do we have to cope with fundamentally lower returns? So far that hasn't been true, and each time we see a correction. So what will happen with that fundamental source of capital? Firstly, only looking into to invest in their domestic markets, but now it's going, well, London, they've reached London already, so it will only be a matter of time before it will go elsewhere. What are the challenges? Focus on cities, first countries. Chris made a striking comment yesterday. China doesn't care about the Netherlands, but Shanghai does care about Amsterdam. And that's, I think, so true. And it's a good way to think about it. Everyone thinks about cities now. Norges Bank, one of the biggest investors in the world, invests in 8 cities. That you think, how on earth will they be capable of putting that amount of capital only in 8 cities? You really have to be a game changer there. Which will be the winning cities, especially in developing countries? There's so much that's still not answered in those, especially the political system. But which will be the developing cities? And when do you want to enter? Climate change and resource scarcity. The last megatrend. Opportunity. Well, of course, that's not rocket science. Businesses that will be able to adapt to climate change and will remain competitive and resilient. An opportunity to attract increasingly climate-conscious capital. For investors, for everyone nowadays, it's important. But as it was many years ago, it's not more that it's only sustainability. Sustainability has to be integrated in a bigger thing. It's part of the total business. And that's also how we see it. Sustainable cities are those that are successful in terms of livability, in terms of adapting to technology, in terms of public and private infrastructure. That's how it works. It's part of the total picture. It's not something separate. Best bets, sustainable buildings. Yes, of course. But does that mean new? Or can you make existing stock more sustainable? Investing in cities with proactive, resilient strategies and public and private investment in green infrastructure and disaster planning. And that's an interesting point, because I looked at resilience, and Grosvenor just published a report a while ago on what are the most resilient cities in the world. And you can find it on their website. It's available for everyone. What I think is so interesting is that 3 Canadian cities are the most resilient in the world. And this is not about climate, not only. This is also about social resilience, social unrest or not. So it's much broader than just the climate aspect in that respect. Amsterdam is at the 12th position, the first Dutch city, which I think is important to think about. And this is also something that investors more and more look at. But what are then the challenges? Increasing losses due to extreme weather. Last week, ULI organized a session here in the Netherlands about disruptive weather events. The impact is going to be bigger. And the main message basically was it is a cultural thing. We have needed to cope with water already ages. In 1100, the water councils, I don't know how do you call them, waterschappen, were launched. So it's always been, and it's almost instrumental in the way we cooperate. We have always had to cooperate to keep our feet dry. And that's, I think, something that's so key and so important to remember. Again, which will be the winning cities, especially in developing countries. Asia, disruptive weather events are a real risk there. So what does this all mean for, and this is where I would like the discussion to concentrate, leadership. What does it mean? How do we cope with all of the trends? Not in 10 years' time, but today and tomorrow. What does it mean for investments? How do investors take this into account? Placemaking, just not only looking at the building you're investing in. And for ULI, 2 key terms are flexibility, because we know one thing for sure, that things will be different tomorrow, and adaptability. How do we cope with that?